Exploration of one of the most controversial education reforms of the 20th century, the introduction of comprehensive schools in Comp.
It's time we stopped destroying good schools which have served generations of pupils well.
On the 1st of May 1979, Margaret Thatcher made an impassioned speech in Bolton. She attacked the destructive dogma of socialist education policy and swore to save the remaining grammar schools.
They were the ladder from the bottom to the top. To those who, like myself, came up that ladder, let us see that it is left there for future generations to climb.
48 hours later, she was Prime Minister, promoting an ethos of self-help, hard work and getting ahead. An ethos neatly matching that of the grammar school. Grammar schools had moulded some of her most loyal ministers, such as Norman Tebbit and Cecil Parkinson. She had little truck with the egalitarian goals of the comprehensive. Yet she had a problem. The secondary schools in England and Wales that she inherited were now mostly comprehensive. She'd even been complicit in their creation in the previous Conservative government. So what happened next? Today we ask, did the comprehensive survive? What kind of schools now emerged? And first, why didn't the Thatcher government do the obvious thing and reintroduce the grammar schools?
My view is that all comprehensive systems are bad. It worked as well in Holyhead as it probably worked anywhere, but mediocrity wasn't actually on our list of priorities.
Well, in 1984, one Conservative council did try to rebuild grammars. Bob Meacham was leader of Solihull Council in the West Midlands. He proposed converting 2 Solihull comps, Arden and Tudor Grange, into grammars, and he won the backing of government. But at a meeting to explain his plans, he found himself facing a school hall packed with seriously unconvinced parents.
Here we are in the hall again today. It doesn't look that big. When I was on this platform 23 years ago, it looked as big as a rugby pitch.
It's just you from the council, is
Yes.
it, against 1,000
Yes.
parents?
I had to justify it as to why we should introduce grammar schools. It was mainly to make sure that the more able children, particularly from the north, had better educational opportunities than they would have had remaining under comprehensive system.
The north is the working class part, is it, where the schools were not as good as in the leafier suburban parts of Solihull?
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Who was it that was least keen on your plan?
Least keen, I think, of all, were the parents who preferred selection by income to selection by ability. People would be prepared to pay a substantial amount of extra money for their houses, for their children to go to Arden, perhaps also Tudor Grange. Their objection was, if my child isn't amongst the 20% brightest, he'll be going to a secondary modern school and the house price will come down. And that I had no sympathy with whatsoever.
OK, now you've talked about the people who were opposing you. Middle-class whingers, really, is what you're saying. Rich middle-class whingers who've got their ticket into the good local school because they bought the house. We have 3 of these people here with us today. Peter, what was it that you didn't like about this plan?
First of all, you say middle-class whingers. We moved into the area when it was a secondary modern. So that argument falls flat on its face.
So why did you oppose it?
We had seen a very determined effort by the council to make Arden a good school. And it worked. It was working well. Why disrupt something that's working well?
Peter Thompson campaigned to keep the comprehensives, along with Mike Brundle and Dr. Peter Lee, a middle-class uprising against a Tory idea.
We're all grammar school boys, and I was totally against the collapse of the grammar school system. But I recognise that secondary moderns didn't give children the right sort of chances. And comprehensive education in this borough, in the south and the east, was something like 50 to 60% of kids were getting 5 equivalent O-levels. And if we went back to grammar schools, we were reversing that.
So Mike, now tell us about your group.
I went to a Parent-Teachers Association meeting at Arden, and with some trepidation I actually stood up and said that I was opposed to this proposal, and a number of other people did. I never believed that we would persuade the council.
We were advised by the Campaign for the Advancement of State Education, and they were very keen to defeat this because Cheltenham was next on the list. This was going to sweep the country if Solihull got it through.
Bob, is that true, that this was today Solihull, tomorrow the country?
I think there's a very, very good chance of that.
And what about that stormy meeting 21 years ago?
I was standing here at the side of the stage, at the side entrance, to some extent orchestrating the people. The more angry the crowd got, the better he became. But he didn't swing the day. He listened to what people said and went away and made the right decision. Drop it.
Kenneth Baker became Education Secretary in 1986. For him, the lesson of Solihull was clear.
In the mid-80s, there was a hostility to the return completely of grammar schools across the country because of the discrimination against children that necessarily involved. And therefore, I don't think it would have been politically feasible to reintroduce that system. I don't think it would have been politically acceptable to do it.
But it wasn't that Mr. Baker liked comprehensives.
The comprehensive vision had failed very largely in many parts of the country. And it had failed, I think, because it had been oversold. It was oversold on the basis that every school could become like the school on the hill, the wonderful, successful grammar school. And that wasn't as it actually turned out. What the parents wanted was better schools. And so I came up with a series of ideas which did produce better schools for them. Where I came from it was that if you look at what happened after the war, there were three types of school. There were the grammar school, the secondary modern, and the technical school, as it was called. The technical school disappeared very early on, which was a huge mistake. And so what I set about doing was to re-establish a new type of school, city technology colleges. And the whole idea was to engage the attention of the children in technology and the latest technology, which is computer technology.
So the next big idea in education was the City Technology College, CTC. There were never that many of them, but they were the early ancestors of so many ideas since, not only city academies but also specialist schools, which dominate the scene today. But I confess, this is where our history of comprehensive schools becomes a bit confusing. What were these CTCs?
This is the most controversial new school in Britain. Kingshurst, the first of a government network of city technology colleges in Solihull outside Birmingham.
We wrote every LEA in the country asking whether they would supply a school.
Sir Cyril Taylor was recruited from a Thatcherite think tank to make CTCs happen.
And Solihull was, I think, the only one that said, yes, we have a school, we just closed, we'd love to have a new school built.
It was an incredibly clapped-out old school. I remember going round it for the first time. And we opened a door. There were virtually no pupils left in the school. It was running down, and it was almost falling down. I opened a door. There were 5 girls, 3 of them smoking. And this is what comprehensive education had ended in Solihull after years of trying.
In 1988, Jack Straw was Labour's education spokesman.
The real motive is to reintroduce selection by the back door and to set up CTCs as Trojan horses to undermine the provision of comprehensive education. The Conservatives have been in power for 9 years. No Conservative local authority has managed to overturn the comprehensive system by a frontal attack. This is an attack from the side.
If Jack Straw thought these CTCs were a new kind of grammar school, Kenneth Baker thought he was creating technical schools. Or were they just fancy-sounding comps? It was a right old muddle, a classic British fudge. Such a fudge, no one was quite sure whether the CTCs were actually selective.
Some had an aptitude test, and one of the early tests were a commitment of the parent. In the first 16, the parents were interviewed, and there was some aptitude testing as well, right at the beginning. I had no problem with that at all. It was not selective in the sense that a grammar school was selective, but you were trying to get the commitment of the parents in particular, to make sure the kids turned up.
To make sure they were middle class and articulate, because wouldn't that be the only thing you'd get out of it?
No, that's a very silly thing to say. Where were these schools? Do you know Kingshurst? It's a real problem council estate on the edges of Birmingham. We didn't go to the leafy suburbs. We didn't go to Dorking and places like that. We went, in fact, to the inner city areas, all of them. And we just took the children from that area in. So don't try and believe that it was some sort of surreptitious selective system. You would be wrong to believe that.
Well, we're standing outside the front of Kingshurst City Technology College near the reception area. We've got a plasticky-looking building in greys, reds and crimsons. And I'm with Lee Parfitt, who was a student in the first year of the school and now is a PE teacher here. Not looking very like a traditional comprehensive school. How different is it to the facilities, the building, the architecture? How different to the normal comps you've been involved in?
When we first arrived, there was a lot of money being put into the school, and the technology was really cutting edge. The equipment and the facilities at that time when I first arrived was unbelievable, absolutely outstanding.
Did you have to go through hoops and hurdles just to be selected to come here?
I had to complete an aptitude test, and we also had an interview, and I think there was obviously the reports from the schools based for selection to get into the school. It was a more rigorous process than what a normal comprehensive student would probably go through.
Helen Grady was also a pupil in the first year. She's now a music teacher at the school. Does she consider Kingshurst a comp?
There are elements of the college which are comprehensive, but I think there's something special about it that makes it very different to other institutions that I've worked in.
Do the facilities here make a really big difference compared to other schools? I mean, did they make a difference when you were a student here, for example, into what sort of opportunities you had?
The most telling experience was my first day of my PGCE in that placement school, because obviously I hadn't been into many comprehensive schools to see the facilities and everything, and it was a real wake-up call to see how lucky I was as a student, because the comprehensive schools in Leeds that I was being placed in were quite different.
When you were a student here, which class did you think of yourself as being from, and did you feel you met other people from different sort of social groups, or was it all just the same people?
I think my upbringing has been very much working class. My parents left school at a very young age.
Certainly it's working class estates around here, isn't it? It's not a sort of particularly posh area, is it?
No, and it's not very affluent either, and people who came to the school from those sorts of backgrounds just grabbed the opportunity with both hands.
I was trying to move back to what did exist, quite clearly. My motive was to re-establish what had been lost in the 1950s and 60s, the technical schools, because I know that is what would turn the children on.
So it wasn't a comp, it wasn't a grammar, it was another part of the tripartite system invented after the Second World War, the technical school. Or was it? I checked with the current head of Kingshurst, Anne Jones.
One of the problems right from the start was that people misunderstood technical and technology, and lots of people used to write to us at the City Technical College, and I often used to send those letters back. So I think it's this whole idea of technology being at the heart of a lot of the things that our students do, and I certainly would not see City Technology Colleges as falling into any part of that tripartite system at all.
Kenneth Baker clearly thought it was all part of building a level of schools here that were rather like the ones they have in Germany that train engineers and maybe apprentices. He's just misunderstood his own invention, has he?
I don't know about that, but what we've got is certainly, I think, infinitely superior.
I suppose one of the things we have to discern is are these comprehensive schools or are they completely different concepts?
I think my understanding of what a true comprehensive school would be is what we do now. So it's offering children from all kinds of different backgrounds and all sorts of levels of ability every opportunity that we can possibly offer them. Well, that's why comprehensive schools, in terms of concept, was so important. But I think CTCs have moved that on beyond the original concept of comprehensivism.
Many have argued these schools do have backdoor selection, and indeed there is a non-verbal reasoning test. But where the 11 plus was used to cherry-pick the brightest pupils, the CTC approach has a different purpose.
It's called fair banding.
So just to be absolutely clear, it is selective, designed to create a cross-section of the entire ability range.
Absolutely right, yes. And it is not grammar schools at all, yes.
So arguably, while Jack Straw, the world, and Kenneth Baker himself thought the comprehensive system was being diluted, Mr. Baker was actually building some rather good comprehensive schools. You could be described, when your obituary is written, you could be described as the man who saved the comprehensive system, because people who think what you did is good absolutely.
Well, it depends who writes my obituary, doesn't it? I think I should write it myself.
But can you not see that potentially...
Oh, I see. I think that that is certainly what it is developing into.
The fuzziness over the comprehensive ideal in the 80s began to resolve from the mid-90s on. Labour was reinventing itself and saw that new kinds of comprehensive were just the sort of thing the party needed. One man oversaw the transition from the Kenneth Baker era to the present day, Sir Cyril Taylor. He took the CTC idea and extended it to create much of the variety of schools we see today, the thousands of specialist schools in particular, schools that raise sponsorship and develop a strength in a particular subject area. Taylor began this under the last Tory government, and it was him who sold the idea to New Labour.
We realised probably as early as 95 that it seemed to be unlikely that the Conservatives were going to win the 97 election. So we went to see David Blunkett, and by extraordinary good fortune, his son was attending a technology college, and he was very pleased at the progress the school was making, and we explained it to them, and they said, well, this sounds rather like a good idea. Now, I think they had difficulty selling it initially to the other members of the party. It helped that in December 96, the then leader of the opposition, Tony Blair, invited me to go up on a train with him to Darlington because he's going to open a technology college, and we got talking, and he too liked the idea.
Are they comprehensives or are they not comprehensives? Are they part of the comprehensive ideal? Are they the next stage of the comprehensive ideal?
I think they're an evolution of the original ideals of the comprehensive school. And from the start, it was a requirement of funding agreements that the schools accept a wide range of ability. We think the specialist schools are now genuinely comprehensive schools, as opposed to many so-called comprehensive schools that tend to recruit only from their narrow catchment areas and either are privileged or disadvantaged.
But they are allowed to take a certain number of students on aptitude.
In theory, up to 10% could be chosen on the basis of aptitude, but very few schools are using it.
Let's return to my old school, which has conveniently survived the successive chapters of change in British education. It was called Dorking Grammar when I started. It was a comprehensive when I left the Ashcombe School. Now it has a subtitle. It's also a specialist language college. David Blow is the headmaster. Now, you've got this specialist school status. Didn't exist when I was around here. What was the logic of getting that, and how much difference has it made?
We waited until it was very clear that being a specialist school wasn't going to be connected with selection or making this school better than the one down the road. So in '98 we went very closely with all of the Dorking schools, and we saw it as offering additional opportunities for pupils. And so almost all of Year 7 go off to Germany, half of Year 8 volunteered to do Spanish as a third language. The last 6, 10 of them go off to China for a 3-week course at the university. Just fantastic opportunities for everybody.
Is there any kind of selection at all, or is it random, or is it just neighbourhood school and you just have the people who are selected by catchment area? How does it work?
There is absolutely no selection here whatsoever. There isn't even covert selection, because it would be very easy to drop a nod and a wink about something. We are absolutely committed to any pupil who wishes to be able to come here can do so.
Happy? Many are. But cast your mind back to the original vision of the comp. The early pioneers had not envisaged specialist schools. They usually had in mind a wonderful neighbourhood comprehensive. The whole community could go there. Today there are critics on all sides who say the schools we've got aren't wonderful and they aren't really comprehensive. John Marks is director of the Education Research Trust.
The neighbourhood school was meant to be a fair system, and it would be so if all the schools were roughly equal in what they gave to their pupils. But what we find is that the best schools are doing perhaps 400% better than the worst schools in every area of the country. So making people go to their neighbourhood school is distinctly unfair, rather than being the fair thing which it was originally intended to be.
On the right, they say, replacing selective schools with neighbourhood comprehensives simply created selective neighbourhoods. Stuart Sexton is a veteran supporter of grammars and was an advisor to the Thatcher government.
Where you've got a catchment area of children who have is almost aptitude more than ability for a more academic education, then you've got comprehensives which are more academic than comprehensives serving other areas, and as we all know, you then get people buying houses to suit the catchment area of the comprehensive, and so you get selection by money instead of selection by ability.
When you look at the results of schools from the comprehensive sector and then from the selective sector, that is the grammar schools and the secondary modern schools taken together, what you find is that the results from the selective sector are roughly 20-25% better on whatever indicator you take than those from the comprehensive schools. The secondary modern schools are doing much better than anyone ever expected. In fact, 1/3 of the comprehensive schools in the country do less well than the secondary modern average.
John Marks. But if the right think the system has let down able children in poor neighbourhoods, the left agree. The left just thinks comprehensives haven't been comprehensive enough. Education historian Clyde Chitty.
Is it a comprehensive system? Well, I don't think it is really, because it depends on what you feel about specialist schools, what you feel about some schools being able to select, even if it's only a very small number of pupils for a particular specialism. It depends on how you see the continued existence of grammar schools, how you see the role of the city academies, the continuing existence of private education. It seems to me it's the sort of system that nobody, if they were starting afresh, would possibly want to devise, because it's a mess.
I think we have something very complicated and slightly covert now. And I see this as a parent. I have a child of 11 and a child of 8. And I think parents feel rather confused and slightly cheated by the system now, particularly in the big cities, because they understand we don't have selection at 11, but we clearly do have all sorts of different schools that take different kinds of children. But it's all rather unclear.
Education journalist Melissa Benn, who, like Clyde Chitty, is a long-time supporter of comprehensive education. So where have we ended up? If many pioneers saw the comprehensive as a mixed neighbourhood school, how have Sir Cyril Taylor and the specialist schools taken the vision away from that?
I think that the original comprehensive schools, when they were thought of, hadn't realised how the social separation was going to take place in our big cities. I mean, you go back to the 50s and 60s in London, although there were some poorer areas, most areas had a wide range of different people living in. Hackney had its grammar schools. Over the years that changed, and the idea you just attended your local school, even if it wasn't a very good school, it was run down, I think that was the problem with the comprehensive school as it had evolved, and the specialist school has changed that and said basically we want parents to choose their school rather than just going to their neighbourhood school.
Parents choosing. But to the extent that occurs, which parents have most freedom to choose? Have we gone from selection by 11 plus to selection by neighbourhood and mortgage to selection by parental motivation? Andrew Adonis is a junior education minister and, significantly, former education policy advisor to the Prime Minister. I asked him whether selection lives on in overt or covert form.
The only 3 criteria that we allow for admissions to schools are on the basis of proximity, or a fair banding system, or on the basis of faith commitments. Now, a particular issue in the past has been interviewing, whether it's unfair that schools are able to interview to judge the commitment of parents and or pupils. We've accepted that there were concerns about interviewing, and indeed the Anglican and the Catholic Education Services themselves accepted that the interviewing regime which used to apply in the case of church schools could often be seen as unfair, and a big change in admissions to church schools in the last few years has been the virtual elimination of interviews from the process. We also do not allow interviews as part of the process of admission to academies.
There's still a question mark I think a lot of people would put over the current system. It's that as soon as you have a choice of schools, a certain type of parent is going to look for a certain type of school. Is there any truth in the accusation that somehow the middle class always find the good schools and you're always going to have things that look like old secondary moderns and don't look like wonderful specialist colleges and academies?
Of course it is the case that the more committed to education parents are, the more discriminating they're likely to be between schools. But my sense of this is that the idea that you have one social group, loosely called the middle class, which is passionate about education, and then you have another social group, the working class, which isn't, I think is a caricature of the past.
Where do you see the evolution of that old vision that was in the 60s of building large, comprehensive schools around the country, mixing everybody up? Do you see yourself as rescuing it, taking it on, or doing something different?
I believe we're seeking at the moment to make a reality of the comprehensive ideal. When that principle was put to the fore in the 60s and 70s, it still remained the case for another generation that most pupils did not succeed at or anywhere near the limit of their potential. Now, that was an ambition in the 60s and 70s. In the modern age, with all the changes which we're seeking to bring through at the moment and much bigger investment in education and the social transformation that's taken place, I believe we have the capacity actually to achieve the ambition.
Andrew Adonis, Junior Education Minister. Politicians want, of course, to deliver good schools and equally good schools for all. But I wonder whether they're up against something. The natural and irrepressible desire of parents to ensure their children get a better than equal chance in life. Did the egalitarian vision of the comp in the 60s, removing selection, misguidedly overlook the fact that parents will always strive to reinvent it? Forget the different abilities of the children. When parents differ in their ability, money or motivation to get their offspring to a good school. We came across an example of it in this series. In our second programme, Bob and Brenda Crane spoke fondly of their school days in the 60s at the radical Rising Hill Comprehensive. But later in the interview, I incidentally asked them what's happened to their children.
Our children went to the old grammar school.
I cried when they got in there because it was the best school in the area, and I cried because I really wanted the best for my two girls. But when the headmaster came, he had the cloak with the bald hat, and when you come in, they had to stand up. And I thought it was great.
This is the last programme in our history of comps. But is it the end of the comp's history? Certainly the name comp is not as widely used as it once was. If you ask how many comprehensives are there in England and Wales, it's hard to answer. It depends what you mean and who you ask. Yet for all the unresolved arguments and divisions about comprehensive education, one thing has been achieved. Agreement on an important point that was not always there in the 50s. That in one form or another, education does properly need to serve all pupils of all social classes at all ability levels. Some last words from Clyde Chitty, John Marks and first Melissa Benn.
It's a very radical idea that all classes and all races and ethnic groups should be educated together. I think it's the most challenging idea of our time, and it does make me laugh when I see everybody sitting and watching Bob Geldof meeting the poor of Africa, and I see a lot of the parents around me doing an awful lot to not be educated with the not even very poor in their neighbourhood.
I think one of the problems with the comprehensive system is the way in which it has greatly diminished opportunities for people from the poorer social classes in this country. And one of the things that the Labour Party achieved by bringing in the comprehensive system, not intentionally, was to kick away the ladder of opportunity up which many of them had climbed themselves. And I think this was an unintended consequence, but it's one that we now need to put right if everybody in this country is to have the sort of education opportunities that they deserve.
I think the idea that's been dispensed with is the idea that all children should go to a comprehensive school. What I'd like to feel is that there is still a reluctance to write children off as failures at a given age. I do feel that one of the things we haven't got back, and I'm glad about that, is the old idea of the 50s, that you can divide children up at a certain age into successes and failures. I'm glad that's not with us, and I don't think it is.
Comp was presented by Evan Davis and produced by Phil Tinline. And you can hear the programme again this evening at 9:30. Next, the secrets of the visitor's book at Gerald's Cottage. But first, look ahead to next Thursday morning at 9.
Hello, In Our Time comes back, and with a new series. We'll try to pull you in with our first subject, magnetism. That strange, attractive force that emerged from magic became a parlour game and a crackpot cure before taking an important part in the story of science. Later on in the season, I'll be discussing the Cynics, the Oresteia, Samuel Johnson's Circle of Friends, the ascendancy of the Mammals, the Black Friars, the Abbasid Caliphs, and gravity. Join me for a new series of In Our Time on Thursday, the 29th of September.
That's Melvyn Bragg, back next Thursday. Now on BBC Radio 4, the tortured inner workings of the mind of the British holidaymaker are laid bare. The words are genuine, but some names and locations have been changed.
Have we got their seatbelts on?
When are we going to get there?
3 hours. Let's go. Okay, guys?
What's the cottage called?
Gerald's cottage.
Gerald's cottage.
There we are. We're here.
Hooray! Gerald's cottage. Hooray!
There we are. We're in.
A quaint and comfortable cottage on an
Cottage and decor, beautiful.
Gerald's cottage is somewhere you can come and feel
Everything's superb. Beautiful cottage.
A lovely holiday in one of the
most magical spots in England.
Lovely scenery.
The cottage was awful.
The ice cube tray requires replacement.
Come over here and have a look at this. This is the visitor's book. First entry is 1982. Somebody from Sheffield here.
Phil and Susan Tennant.
I see. Although a reasonable cottage.
We felt that more attention could have been paid to the standard of kitchen utensils, e.g. it could have been purchased new rather than cram the drawers with worn and broken items.
Does it really matter?
2 wine glasses is hardly sufficient. But on the other hand, we can hardly move for plates.
Pull and nasty. I found Gerald's well equipped, and who cares about being worn? Will I get thrown out when I'm worn at the edges?
Otherwise, the family had a pleasant holiday.
August 1985. Martin and Jemima, Harry and Josh. Cheshire. Many a wet day was spent trying to assemble the cooker grill. This game kept the whole family amused for hours on end. A liberal sprinkling of cobwebs added to the old world charm.
Oh, there's a spider walking across the carpet. Oh, look.
I don't like spiders.
Well, it's only a little spider. Let's put it over there. It's a cottage. Right, there's some fantastic things here. Look here, it says here.
18th of April 1988. Mabel and Beryl Price. Exeter. No one likes a grumbler, so...
No.
Nice setting, great walks, a relaxing holiday. But watch out for the kitchen utensils. You might need a typhoid injection.
Yes.
Beware mould and ancient grease.
Oh, it is bad, damn it.
28th of May to the 4th of June. Felicity Smart and Stuart Foster, Treetops, Kings Lynn, Norfolk. What a pity for some people that they worry about trivia like cooking utensils. P.S. Does anyone know whether it is the deadly hemlock water dropwort going down by the river?
June 1984. Bill and Wendy. Barnstable, Devon. Beware the door catch on the Welsh dresser. It ripped a hole in my new trousers.
23rd to the 30th of July. Anonymous. Notwithstanding the earwigs in the bathroom, bugs on the kitchen table, grease on the cooker, damp on the walls, the cottage was awful. Next year is 2 weeks at Gatwick Airport. Look under builders. No demolition in the yellow pages, Gerald.
31st of July to the 6th of August. Annie and Keith Waters, Basingstoke. I do not want this column to turn into a slanging match with the previous occupants, but may I suggest that such people stay in their sterilised townhouses?
Tom and Frida, Birmingham. Anyone wanting modernisation? Try Trust House 40.
18th to 25th of August 1990. Garin, Bethan, Dan and Idris, Bangor. Unfortunately, red warning about Welsh dresser door catch too late. And we also had a repair of trousers.
What's that one?
Oh, that's just somebody who's come here with, well, it's a bloke and 2 women that come for the weekend.
2 women?
May 87. Samantha, Claire and Robert. 3 hearts.
3 hearts.
3 minds.
3 minds.
3
beautiful bodies.
Beautiful bodies.
Our union shattered these Cornish stars.
The sap rose and the earth trembled.
Amor vincit omnia.
This is a great one here.
Feb 1990, Vicky Gloucester. Go to see the Merry Maiden Stone Circle. I had a multiple orgasmic experience. Oh.
It's fantastic. 28th of July. Jack Dawson. Another nice stay in the homely cottage, except visit to Penn's Zens Hospital, and make it the best of holidays here.
Oh, Cardiff, eh?
There's an American healer.
April 2000, Kathy and Chuck, LA. Location truly magnificent. Lovely walks, cows, wildlife. Now the bad news.
Beware of the mattresses on the bunk beds and the chairs and sofa in the living room.
Bring warm clothes for the bathroom.
And avoid using the bat rings of the cooker.
Turn on the hot water at least 1 pound gobble an hour prior to bath.
Whatever you do, man, don't dream of casseroles.
Yeah.
Wonder if I should get some milk.
You know, there are lots of people in the visitors book who don't like this cottage.
Guys,
What do you think of that?
sad.
Well, people expect different things. I mean, that's what it
They
is.
probably have high-tech showers.
Frankly, for £300, I would have expected to see a shower attachment in the bathroom by now.
A bit dirty.
No curtains on bathroom.
Cupboards full of junk.
Another chair would have enabled a member of our party to have a more relaxing evening.
The electric heater's a joke.
May 1996. Tamara Hire, East Sussex. I have been coming to this cottage since I was 2 years old, as my mother owns this cottage. It is so peaceful down here in this little village of Zena. I read the messages people leave and think, why do they ask for dishwashers and washing machines? You can come here and get away from it all. The peace and quiet.
The telly's on the blink. Pete and Jane, Canvey Island.
I think that there should be a fourth chair, as one person had to sit on the stairs, which is a bit uncomfortable. Regarding kitchen utensils and equipment, really what is needed is a new complete set of saucepans, some Pyrex dishes and a casserole dish for cooking in. The cooker itself we found to be a total disgrace.
How sad and disappointed we were to find how run-down and shabby this cottage has become since our last visit.
Very filthy. I shouldn't think it's been cleaned inside since it was new.
Perhaps the cleaner should be sent on a domestic science course?
Cooker door and grill hanging off, night storage heater in back bedroom very erratic, worked when it felt like it.
Sorry, Gerald, but from us it's goodbye. Klaus and Uschi, West Germany.
This is not a home-from-home place. This is somewhere to relax with all your basic needs. This cottage has a special look and feel to it. There's something for everyone. All I can say is, I love it here. No noise, no hassle, just peace and tranquility. Thanks, Mum, for such a lovely place to come and enjoy.
Raymond and Eileen, Whitley Bay. What a pleasure it is to be back again in this warm, cosy, quirky and well-appointed visitors' book. Better than any soap, it seems to me that the entries fall into two main camps. The functionists, like, the people who are mainly focused on the facilities, or the lack of them.
For those of us from the city, the half curtains in the bathroom were unnerving and full ones would be better. Sally and Fiona, London.
And the existentialists, who seem to be saying, never mind the facilities, just feel the magic.
Half-term 93, Mike, Margaret and Matthew, London. No motorways, no bomb scares, no shrieking police sirens, no reggae music. What a lovely peaceful change.
P.S. We have fixed the toothbrush holder and glass door in the oven as a gesture of goodwill.
What time is it, George?
9:10.
What's everybody fancy doing today?
I want to sleep in my new den, what George is helping me make.
Well, what about... I can't stay here all day. Where should we go?
Play rugby on the beach.
What do you want to do, sir?
I want to go for a walk on the beach.
Kitty, Andrew and Ellie, North London. A beautiful place. Ellie has learnt what a cow says. Can't bear the idea of leaving for London. Husband insists on taking a smelly crab claw with us. There seems to be more sky here than anywhere else in the country. I will remember the sun.
And the sea.
September 2002.
Paul!
And Joe, Putney.
Surf, surf!
September 2003.
Paul!
And Joe, Putney.
It's still up!
Tara and Piers, Oxfordshire.
West Penwith is an ancient place steeped in the history of the last 6,000 years. A place where spirits whisper of past generations. A place where every cottage, each rock and stone, tells the story of their brief lives.
Jack Shaw, age 9, Bristol. I like bunk beds.
Keith, Pat and Melanie, age 3. April 97, Cumbach, near Aberdare. We've had a lovely holiday in a lovely cottage. We found a visitor's book highly entertaining. The bloke who tore his trousers on the dresser, it ripped a hole in my new trousers.
Lord knows what you have to do to catch your trousers on the Welsh dresser. Stephen Rachel, Spurstow and Milton Keynes.
The family from Sheffield who complained about the knives and forks in June 84.
We felt that more attention could have been paid to the standard of kitchen utensils.
Samantha, Claire and Robert, the Menage a Trois.
3
beautiful bodies.
How did Robert, Claire and Samantha manage 3 in a bed? We tried, and it wasn't really comfortable. Terry, Sarah and Jade, age 2.
The family who seemed to study and complain about every inch of the cottage.
Cooker door and grill hanging off, night storage heater in back bedroom, very erratic.
Did they ever see anything else in Cornwall? No complaints from us, we'll be back.
Right, I'm afraid to say, guys, I think it's time to leave. There we are. Put the visitors book there. Come on, let's go.
Simon Bisley and Joanna Taylor, Bath. As a professional travel writer, photographer, my work often involves visiting hotels, cottages, or wonderful places all over the world. This Christmas, I just wanted to get away from work, spend a week relaxing with my lovely girlfriend. I chose and paid for this cottage based on my memories of the village and pub, and its distance from the rest of the world. After a week here, I'm writing again, trying to describe a wonderful place. Well, I suppose I could say a few words for free. This is a sensationally good self-catering cottage, from those massive bare granite walls to the delicate mottled paint job. Sitting around that ridiculously large kitchen table, drinking wine by candlelight, or brushing my teeth in the bathroom, watching a perfect brown cow clamber over the hedge into the back garden is not the sort of Cornwall experience you'll get at a 4-star hotel in St. Ives, or a modern anonymous rented bungalow in Penzance. All those quibbles about kitchen utensils, chairs, curtains and catches on the dresser were, I suppose, justifiable, but an odd way to record your feelings about staying at such an atmospheric, engrossing village. I've stayed in plenty of self-catering holiday homes where the decor was like a wimpy show home, and the equipment like a Comet showroom. They had all the character of a motorway service station. Character involves compromise. So what if my feet are cold and the heating erratic? I've had a fantastic week that I'll remember all my life.
Okay.
Bye, Dada. Bye, Gerald's cottage.
Okay, let's go. Back again next year.
The Ice Cube Tray Needs Replacing featured the vocal talents of Joanna Ruiz, Paul Jones. It was directed by Christopher Morris and produced by Terry Lewis, and was a Tinderbox production for BBC Radio 4.
1st of November 97. The Wyatts, Boozle. Beware cracked floorboards in front of cupboard in the back bedroom.
On Radio 4 FM now, it's